This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. All right, some news about the Browns' upcoming contest against the Jacksonville Jaguars is broke today, and we're going to talk about it. The Browns are going into this game with the injury report looking pretty similar to what it looked like last week. So David Njoku is the new addition. He's going to be out. No surprise there. We expect him to be out for at least a couple of weeks. We'll see what happens after that. Jed Wills is a bit of a surprise here. This is the second time Jed Wills has come back to practice, but has been listed out for a game. It is worth noting, though, unlike last week where Jed Wills practiced and then did not practice the day after, Jed Wills was limited both days in practices consecutively, which means that he is definitely making progress. We'll see what he looks like next week, but I do expect that he makes progress enough to look like he could actually play next week. I think his first game back, he's going to be in limited. So I think we have until probably week 4 until you see Jed Wills starting at left tackle again. But I think he could play as early as week 3 if what his injury patterns are indicating are in fact what they are indicating. Jack Conklin is questionable for this week's game, which is better than what it was listed as last week because he was listed out versus the Dallas Cowboys. This week he's listed questionable, so he's making progress there. He did practice. I think he practiced limited both days, and then he was practicing aligned at left tackle when he was out there. So there is a chance that he plays left tackle. I'm not 100% sure if the Browns are going to force it with him at left tackle, to be honest, because James Hudson wasn't horrible against the Dallas Cowboys last week. Now, without David Njoku and that being a big part of your chip plan, maybe that changes things and you want somebody you feel like can survive on an island a little bit better, and maybe you feel like Jack Conklin can do that a bit better than James Hudson could. But also, I think James Hudson really showed some strength in the run block game last week, really was serviceable out there at left tackle, much more so than I would have assumed he'd be. So either way, I think the Browns should be able to hold up offensive line wise. A lot of what happened when it comes to pressure in that game, and again, this is something we've talked about for a very long time. A lot of the pressure in that game that was created has a lot to do with how Deshaun Watson handles himself in the pocket. He's never been somebody who does not take a ton of hits despite the quality of the offensive line. I think a lot of people kind of thought Texas's offensive line was so much worse than it was just because Deshaun Watson was there. And that's because the way Deshaun Watson plays is very similar to how Joe Burrow plays. And no matter who's on the offensive line with Joe Burrow, we hear about him getting sacked a lot, him getting hit a lot. It's the same thing with Deshaun Watson. He plays a style of football that takes a little bit of a higher chance of getting hit behind the line of scrimmage in order to make plays downfield. Now, the question is, can Deshaun Watson make the plays downfield to justify that play style? Well, we'll see, because last week he most certainly did not do that. So that is really what I think a lot of the pressure came down to, because you look at the pressure charts, a lot of it was up the middle. I mean, sometimes it was the centers getting beat. Like, it wasn't the greatest pass protection game I've ever seen in my life. I'm not saying the Browns offensive line was like amazing week 1, but it wasn't as bad as some of those pressure numbers or QB hit numbers especially indicate. A lot of that is on Deshaun Watson. And just go look at Deshaun Watson's pressure to sack numbers throughout his career. Go look at Deshaun Watson's sack numbers throughout his career. They seem to follow him. He takes a ton of sacks. Last year, he had a higher pressure to sack number than like Joe Flacco by a significant margin, even when you just look at the 6 games that he was out there. This is just a part of Deshaun Watson's game. Again, if he's able to make those plays out of structure, if he's able to throw the ball downfield, it's justifiable. But if he's not doing that, then that becomes a huge problem, like we saw on Sunday. So that's got to be something that makes an improvement there. But I think offensive line wise, I don't think they're in a rush to put Jack Conklin out there left tackle, but they might use Jack as an eligible tackle, kind of work him back slowly to hopefully mitigate any risk of future injuries for Jack Conklin. So that's what's going on with the Browns offensive line. But there is good news on the Jacksonville injury report, at least for the Cleveland Browns. Two of the Jacksonville Jaguars starting secondary players are not going to play in this game, right? We saw the report earlier this week about them missing Tyson Campbell, and now Darnell Savage does not look like he's going to play. So they're missing their starting safety. They're missing their starting corner. So they're going to be down two guys. This is a secondary that already struggled last week at times. Keep in mind, they were playing Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, and they only gave up 17 points. So I don't think it's just going to be a cakewalk to throw the ball on the Jacksonville Jaguars, but losing those two players is going to make a significant difference in how the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be aggressive about their secondary, right? They might not be as aggressive about blitzing because their secondary isn't healthy. They can't rely on some of these guys to hold up in man coverage. They don't want to test their coverage plans as much. Maybe they have absolutely no fear of Deshaun Watson walking into this game and they decide to do it anyways. I expect the run game to be a bigger factor than a lot of people anticipate in this game, just because I think the Browns are going to have to run the ball to be successful on offense, period, no matter who's at quarterback going forward. But that's kind of the update there with Jacksonville. That makes me want to move on to this topic, which has popped up, right? Because a lot of fans, justifiably so, aren't at a great place right now with the team. They don't believe in the Cleveland Browns. I saw a poll earlier this week where Browns fans ranked the Browns amongst the 10 worst teams in the NFL. Now, again, when Deshaun Watson plays bad, there usually is an avalanche of negative discourse that kind of gets thrown on top of everybody else in the Cleveland Browns and kind of drags them down perception-wise. And this was the worst Deshaun Watson game of his life. So it is going to have that kind of effect. But I do think that this Cleveland Browns team is good. The reason I made the video earlier this week about if Jameis Winston could step in here if Deshaun continues to play this poorly isn't because I want to jump ship on the Browns or say that this season is over. It's actually the opposite. I think the Browns can get a lot out of this season if they get better quarterback play than what they got versus the Dallas Cowboys. Now, they can get that a number of ways. It could be Jameis Winston. Maybe it could be DTR. It could be Deshaun Watson bouncing back and having a miraculous end to the season despite how he started this season. But the truth of the matter is you're going to need better quarterback play than this. And we've seen Kevin Stefanski be able to get less decorated quarterbacks to higher places, right? The Browns had a top 10 offense with Baker Mayfield. They had a top 10 offense with Jacoby Brissett. We've seen him be able to do this before. I trust that Kevin is going to be able to get this offense in a place to where they can be top 10. The question is the quarterback who's starting right now, Deshaun Watson, is he mentally at a place where he can lock in enough to be able to do that? That's my big concern with Deshaun. I don't think what Deshaun did on Sunday had anything really to do with his shoulder injury, had much to do with a new offense, or had anything to do with the pressure that he was getting from the offensive line, more than it had to do with a guy looking like he's in his own head because he's got too much going on outside of football. And I think that, to me, is the biggest concern, right? I can't have that be a factor to think about when we're talking about the quarterback of the team. So I know Deshaun's talented. He was in like 3 Pro Bowl games, and the Browns traded a lot to get him. But if he's not mentally at the point to where he can run the offense at the level that we expect him to, you have Jameis Winston for a reason. And Jameis Winston is here because I would hope the Browns have learned from their mistakes. I don't want to see this season take a 2021 turn. And right now, it feels like a 2021 turn isn't that far away from happening. Now, again, Hope the Browns learn from those mistakes. And I think there are a couple of things that differentiate this from 2021 in a big way. And I'll explain that. But you don't want to see this season take a 2021 turn, a 2019 turn, where you're following an optimistic season and then you get followed up by having a terrible one right after that. And I think bringing in Jameis Winston was insurance against that, right? Because when Baker had that bad year and you only had Case Keenum behind him, it was a really what can you do moment. Like, I still contend that you probably had to start Baker Mayfield that whole season because he was the best quarterback you had on the roster. And you really didn't have an alternative plan B in place. If you're the Cleveland Browns, it's much different this time. You feel much different about Jameis Winston playing than you do about Case Keenum. And if you give DTR like 8 weeks, I think you feel much better about him playing than you feel about Case Keenum playing. So you have those backup options. And I think it's important for the Browns to not take those options off the table just because it'll be embarrassing or inconvenient for a week to go to it because of the implication of you benching this super expensive quarterback. There's a lot of season here left to play for the Cleveland Browns, and there's a lot of season left to salvage for the Cleveland Browns. I think they can do a lot of the things that we thought they could do, include getting to the second round of the playoffs, if they make some moves and get better quarterback play, however that happens, out the position, because they have a great defense. And I think people are down on this week, but I think they're very much over exaggerating how much the defense did not play well in week one. I think that is a key example of the feelings that we have about Deshaun Watson leaking into other places that aren't Deshaun Watson related and kind of unfairly throwing that on the defense. I get that they didn't stop a couple of orbit screens, but like that wasn't what was happening all game. This defense was able to stop the Cowboys when the game was still within reach for the Cleveland Browns. And the Cowboys were still trying to score to put the game away. The Browns defense forced like 5 3-and-outs in a row. So the defense, I think, is really going to show itself to be a thing that can help you stay in these football games. You just got to help yourself offensively. Can't have as many 3-and-outs as you did. You got to get better quarterback play by any means necessary. You got to get better quarterback play. I don't care who it is that does the quarterbacking, but by any means necessary, you got to get quarterback play to be better than what it was week one. That's the bottom line here. Another thing to keep in mind that's going to drastically change how this season feels versus how other seasons has felt. You're going to get significantly healthier, you would hope, by the 6-week point for this team, right? By 6 weeks, you would hope to have a full complement of tackles that you have available. Jack Conklin being back, you have DeJuan Jones, and then you have Jed Wills. But also in 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, if it takes that long, you hope to have a full complement of running backs, because not only would you expect Nick Chubb to be back, which is going to be a huge boost to this team, but also Nyheim Hines. And I think it's an important year to be healthy at running back and to have a lot of depth at running back, because again, we're looking at it week one, the trend's obvious. You got to run the ball to be successful in 2024. Even Thursday Night Football showed that. So you're going to want to run the ball a lot. You're going to want Nick Chubb back. And since Nick Chubb's coming off injury, you're going to want Jerome Ford running at a good level, which I think could happen for them. You want Deontay Foreman. You want Nyheim Hines. You want all of these guys really performing for this team, and getting those guys back during the course of the season will uplift the spirits in this locker room after what was a very disappointing week one, especially if they could put together a really good performance here in week two and get a dub. But that's my thoughts about this week. I think this is a winnable game for the Cleveland Browns, and I'm going to say that I think the Browns can win this game versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think the defense is strong enough to do it. I think you can run on Jacksonville. I know a lot of people are saying the Jacksonville Jaguars have this great run defense. I think the Browns can run on them. I think the Browns can put up points on them if they get competent quarterback play from the position, and I think the defense can really force Trevor Lawrence into a bind and make him throw some turnovers to put this in the Cleveland Browns' direction. The Jaguars aren't a perfect team. And you're playing a lot of unperfect teams upcoming in the schedule. So if you're the Cleveland Browns, that's what I would want to focus on. And that's what I think is the main thing for this team, is that the season ain't over yet. The team's still very good. You just got to get better quarterback play by any means necessary. And fortunately for the Cleveland Browns, this is the year that they decide to really invest in backup quarterback. And I think that's going to prove to be a good thing if it comes down to it. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.